I'm reading The Only Planet of Choice, Essential Briefings from Deep Space, transceiver Phyllis V Schlemmer, edited by Mary Bennett. A provocative mind-opening experience, says James J. Hultuck, PhD. This was published in 1993 and mainly deals with the time on our planet between the 70s and the 90s. I finished the chapter called Crossroads, which was chapter 9. So now this is a whole new part of the book. It's called New Light on Earth's Ancient Histories. Chapter 10, page 124. The Seeding of Humanity and the Aksu Culture. This is a mainly question and answers, and Tom speaks for the collective. It also gives an introduction. In the early 40s, 25 stone discs were found in caves in the Bahavan Kaya Ula mountains on the border of Tibet and western China by a Chinese archaeologist. These strange discs belonged to the tribesmen who still live in these caves. From the Ham and the Drawpup tribes, they seemed unrelated to any other ethnic group, being of fray built and about 4 feet high. Some 25 years after their discovery, the discs were eventually deciphered. The hieroglyphics on one of them read, "The droppers came down from the sky in their gliders. Our men, women and children hid in the caves 10 times before sunrise." When at least they understood the sign language of the droppers, they realized that the newcomers had peaceful intentions. The Chinese archaeologists speculated that these discs and the present occupants of the caves corresponded to the ancient Chinese legends relating stories of men who came down from the clouds. Tom had said in reply to questions of origin, "All beings on this planet have lived on other planets, but there are those that are a mixture. Physical beings may be reborn on another planet. A species is a mixture of 2 or more planets at the time of its physical existence. It has a strong ego and it has free will." Mickey: When did humans start to have souls, to be real human beings? Tom: When the dawning of reason began to come to the more evolved members of the species, when the natives upon planet Earth began to evolve and body, when reasoning began with the assembling of tools and with the forming of a method of communication. That was when soul first came to this planet. John: We have spoken of 32,000 years ago, but not of the time before that. Is it true that there were evolved civilizations on this planet millions of years ago? There have been artifacts found, metal and so on, which are very, very old, and which could indicate previous intelligent civilizations. Tom: I will ask permission. We may say this to you. Yes, approximately 20 million years ago, there were beings with soul on this planet. John: Were they evolved technologically to the extent that they were on Altea, or as much as we are? Tom: No, not greatly. Some of them were on planet Earth for the preparation of the planet, in terms of plants and animals and understanding. Also, some of them were the others. Guest: Are you able to say whether the mission of those preparing planet Earth what? Guest: Are you able to say whether the mission of those preparing planet Earth was accomplished? Tom: Is not planet Earth beautiful? Guest: It certainly is, yes. I was wondering whether everything they set out to do was accomplished at that time. Tom: Do you not view it? Guest: Yes, certainly. Tom: Did you not answer yourself? Guest: Yes, I seemingly did answer myself. I was wondering also what specific kind of preparation were they making at that time, 20 million years ago. Tom: Arranging the etherics and what you term chakra around Earth, in the other spheres also, for those who would come to Earth to pass through, for their learning process and the preparation of your fauna and flora energy fields, yes? Guest. And when you speak of the chakras of the planet, are you referring to what might be called power centers in the landscape at different points on planet Earth? Guest. Tom. Yes, what you would call ley lines, yes? Guest. I was wondering also what the others were up to at this time. Tom. Trying to cut the ley lines. Guest. Did they actually have any success in making things difficult? Tom. They succeeded with a serpent, did they not? Therefore, humankind was entrapped. In 1979, the following discussion took place. Gene, this is Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek. Have the civilizations represented by the 9 visited Earth in humanity's distant historical past? Tom. Yes, many times. Gene. Is it also true that some of them remained on planet Earth, interbreeding with a human here? Tom. There were civilizations that colonized the planet Earth. The original beings that evolved on the planet Earth were what you would call the black race. Gene. Do I then understand that the races other than the black race are a result of interbreeding between the black and the people of the civilizations? Tom. No, the Orientals, the whites and the reds have been colonized, have been of other civilizations. Gene, are they the result of breeding on Earth, or were they brought to Earth? Tom. They are the result of breeding upon Earth. Tom. Since the whites and the reds and the yellows represent breeding of advanced civilizations, does that mean that the black is inferior to other races, or are they merely different? Can you explain what the difference is? Tom. The black is an equal race upon the planet Earth. Those that colonized from other civilizations to the planet Earth, and the Hawks civilization had a portion of involvement, attempted. How can we explain? Before the time of 32,000 years BC, seeds were placed upon the planet Earth. Then by 32,000 BC, the seed had evolved into a human being. Then at that time, those of the other civilizations came to this planet with a being we could call the Hawk, to interbreed the seeded people with beings from other civilizations. The blacks evolved from the planet. It was an experience to see in which manner the originals that were not seeded would evolve in comparison with those that colonized. Those that colonized after a period of time, because they came from other civilizations that had perhaps more intelligent technology, began to feel that they were superior to the blacks. They contrived to dominate the black people. What was planned for the planet Earth did not come to pass. After the seeding, it was discovered by the cult civilizations that, of all the planets in the universe, it is the only planet that has such beauty, such diversity of changes, and such density, more than any other planet in the universe. It was also discovered that those that existed upon planet Earth had great physicalness and sexuality, not witnessed on any other planets, and the colonists began to live in desire for physicalness, and began reincarnating on planet Earth. As they recycled, they began to hold the originals of the planet in bondage. Many discussions on this subject with other sitters. Steve, I'd like to ask about the historical information we've been given about civilizations on Earth before 32,000 BC. I understand the black races were the only people on Earth at the time. Is this so? Tom, it was those that evolved on Earth. It was the original on the Earth. Steve, they were not in just one location in Africa, were they? Because I understand that there have been finds in Siberia and China. Tom, they evolved on all the land masses of the Earth. Steve, yet people of China, Siberia and South America are not Negroid. Tom, when you speak of others, the red, the yellow and the white, they were descended from colonizations from other civilizations many thousands of years ago. This is not the same as the colonization from the higher civilizations of 32,000 BC. The originals were black color. John, and so, is it true to say that the blacks are the only race that went through a complete evolution from here? Tom, yes. Those that are the nature of black color were the indigenous of this earth. They may, if they have the wish, go as souls to other worlds for evolution or evolve in different situations within this planet. It is their choice. John, We speak often, this is 1981, of the East-West conflict, but I think more and more of us becoming aware that the real imbalance on Earth is the North-South conflict, in the sense of the relative prosperity of the North and the poverty of the South. It's hard for me to understand why that imbalance exists. Can you comment on this? Tom, this planet has been evolving for thousands upon thousands of years. We have explained about the colonization of your planet Earth from other civilizations. Those that are, as you identify it, of the South came largely from Earth. They did not have an input of other civilizations to assist the evolutionary process. John, yes, but is there a sort of an energy that brought the colonizers to the north rather than spread them evenly around the planet? You mean of grid lines, Andrew and John? Yes. I mean, that was a long time ago, and yet it's still the north that seems to have the strength. Tom, that was the settlement area, yes. John, Tom, that was the settlement area, yes. John, do you perceive that as a serious imbalance, as we do, in one sense, that there is a more long-term problem? Tom, the tragedy is that by the colonization, those beings and species considered themselves superior. It was not meant to be that way, and this is the imbalance. There should have been a putting of their hands in the hands of others. Others who greatly distrusted... right, okay, say this again. The tragedy is that by colonization, those beings and species considered themselves superior. It was not meant to be that way. That is the imbalance. There should have been a putting of their hands in the hands of others. The seed of Abraham spread through and completely around the earth. Then this situation would not have arisen. But because it was not done in that manner, because there were others who greatly distrusted the colonizers, were jealous of their situation, the colonizers remained in a combination of tightness for survival and protection. In that respect, yes, there is an imbalance. John, when the hawk came down to Earth, at what stage were the Earth people? They have not had any previous contact in any form at all with civilizations. Were they what we would call barbaric, or, Tom, you might call them simply structured societies? John, yes, and then there was a mixing of the genes with them. Tom, yes, that was the beginning of a more advanced culture on planet Earth. Andrew, what kind of race was found there with whom to begin doing the bioengineering? Were the hawks, were they blacks, whites, or yellows? Tom, the civilizations have never mingled with the original race of Earth, which is the black race, but other beings had been set upon Earth by other civilizations. Civilizations that you would find of superior intelligence to you, but not working in direct cooperation with the 24, who transported groups of beings that were outcasts. These in turn evolved as human. It was this race which was mixed and intermingled by those who landed in 22,400 BC. They were placed. We cannot use the word seeded because that is not the appropriate word. John, thank you. One question which leads out of this is that about 34,000 years ago, Neanderthal man didn't suddenly acquire a large brain, as far as we understand it, and then suddenly die and be replaced by Cro-Magnon man. Can you explain that particular point, please? Tom, the Neanderthals were not the beginning of humankind. John, and they died out. So what were the origins of Cro-Magnon man then? It was always thought that the one led to the others, but now it seems they have different strains. Tom, how could one lead to the other when they came from another civilization not upon this planet? You are trying to set it within the realms of what your scientific anthropologists attempt to reconstruct, eliminating the seeding. John, so the first appearance of Cro-Magnon man, as we know, is in a scientific sense, would have been in the Tarim Basin in Aksu? Tom, that is correct. In 1974, Andrew and Tom had a discussion which links to the preceding subject. Andrew, how was the first colonization carried out? Tom, a small number of beings arrived on Earth and they founded the first civilization. And when I say the first civilization, that is not truly so, but they were the first arrival of people of ours, and that was over 32,000 years BC. Andrew, and where would that have been? Tom, at Akisu, near what you call the Tarim Basin, written Aksu, A-K-S-U, pronounced Akisu by Tom. Akisu is in Jianyang Province, China, at 4101 north and 80.20 east. Andrew, I see. I gather that the civilization eventually did not succeed and things did not go well. Tom, it was not the fault of those who landed. Andrew, I wonder, what was the failure then? Was it premature? Tom, it was too soon. The mind and the souls of the spirits were too dense. It was a high civilization, not properly adapted to Earth. Andrew, are there any remnants of that civilization? Tom, I will check. Will you wait? They will tell me yes, but not that can be seen. It is under the surface. Andrew, what kind of elements of civilization did the visitors try to give at that time? What were they concerned with? Was it agriculture or medicine or writing or astronomy or what? Tom, it was language. In order to raise the beings of the planet from a near animal level, it was a form of communication. Andrew, do you have any example of this language? For example, what was the name of this gentleman? The Hook. Tom, I'll give it to you in your alphabet, but it did not have that alphabet. The alphabet has no vowels, but it had vowels when spoken. Andrew, yes, the sound that had a vowel, but no written representation. Tom, it would be the difficulty is that our being does not have the terms available for us to refer to in her mind. Andrew, yes, thank you. I'll figure out how that's pronounced. Tom, when this civilization was lost, and every civilization that has been lost, there were small groups that were not lost, but travelled a long distance to remove themselves from the area. Andrew, yes, and where did some of these people go? I mean, in what culture would we know them now, if at all? Tom, they do not exist, but they moved to 3 areas. It was a large civilization, and outside the Aksu civilization there was another subsidiary civilization. The Hawk also attempted to bring the principle of one leader. Andrew, what was that one leader called in that language? Where was that word? Tom, it would be a Y and a K, but it has a vowel sound. Yuck. Andrew, something like ak. Tom, yes, but not quite. Andrew, how long was the Hawk on Earth for that particular mission? 1,600 of your years. Andrew, that's incredible. Did he have any offspring? Tom, all of the world. Andrew, you mean he was the sole source of the seed, so to speak? Tom, no. The seed was from a civilization, and it was the beginning of the true understanding. Andrew, did he just live as an ordinary being, as far as everybody else was concerned at that time? Tom, he attempted to, but he was not permitted. He was called the Hawk by them, as he was also later called the Hawk by the Egyptians, because he came from us. Andrew, did these early people see him appear from the sky? Tom, yes. Andrew, in a craft or something? Tom, yes. Andrew, I see. They associated that with a hawk? Tom, yes. Andrew, did he appear on Earth looking like everybody else, or did he look different? Tom, realizing the close to animal stage of these beings, his costume was made to resemble a bird, in order for them to be able to understand. Andrew, during the 1600 years that the Hawk worked, was there success in bringing about some element of civilization? Tom, it was slightly more, but that is close. He brought civilizations. He brought language to the people, so could communicate, and enlightenment. He brought the knowledge and technology of how to build strongly, how to protect, how to grow, how to cultivate in order to grow strong, and how to heal within themselves. Andrew, was all this done by natural healing and natural selection of seeds and so on? Was there any chance or knowledge that we would identify with physics, chemistry and mathematics or astronomy that was given at that time, or was it too early? Tom, it was all done in a way that they were able to understand. Andrew, how long did the average person live on Earth at that time? What was the average lifetime? Tom, 20 years. The colonists were able to raise the life experience to 120, to 150, and many lived longer. Andrew, so they must have been quite impressed by the fact that the Hawk was around for well over 1,000 years. Yes, he was regarded as a god. Andrew, and that's how the whole mistake arose. How the notion of gods arose amongst men? I see. When did the hawk make another appearance on Earth after that first venture, 2,400 years ago? Tom, in the time span between the first coming, before the hawk passed into your world again, another being continued the thread. Andrew, was this at Aksu? Tom, that is correct. Andrew, how long was that for? Tom, the new one was without civilization for 2,020 years of your time. He came as the son of Hawk. Andrew, did he indeed appear to be as an earthly son, even though he came from your place? Tom, the people knew the difference. Tom, John, what was the name? Tom, I will try. You do not have the sounds to reproduce it. It had a sound of vowels, but it had no written vowels. It was R-T-T-H-R. But remember, it began with a sound that was not written. Andrew, yes, with an unstopped vowel. It would sound something like Arthur, something like that. Yes. How much longer did that civilization after that person's existence be, if at all? How much longer did that civilization last after this person's existence, if at all? Tom, it existed, but for a brief 600 years longer. John, would you say what happened at the end? Tom, it was natural. John, was this one of the periodic natural disturbances that they sometimes call a polar shift or something? Tom, yes. Both of these things returned to Earth in the time of 6,000 to 5,000 before BC. It was at that time that more beings came with them. Andrew, and in what lands did they appear? Tom, it was called what you now say Egypt. Andrew, were they also in summer or in Ur? Tom, before, then in Egypt. Andrew, did they come from the sky at that time? Tom, yes. John, you said that the hawk arrived in the craft? Andrew, they saw it as a form of a bird. Tom, yes, and those with him mingled with those who hear, and created a new species. John, they had what we call physical intercourse to produce children. Is that correct? Tom, it was more evolved, higher. Andrew, a method of upgrading the local species on Earth, right? Tom, strengthening. Andrew, and they used their own means and knowledge to do that, right? Tom, yes. Andrew, and when they appeared on Earth, they found certain beings that they thought would help to strengthen the species. So they mingled with them and developed a hybrid. And then they watched to see what would happen with that hybrid. Tom, that is in essence the truth. The problem with the beings that existed was that they worshipped the visitors. They was handed down through the species, and the species then worshipped. Guest, is it possible for you to give me more images of the Aksu culture, and about any phases it went through, or any other characteristics which would be useful to know? Tom, Akisu was seeded colony, arranged for the evolution of your planet Earth, and for teaching the process of progress, for a leap forward of humankind. There had been a realization that if we waited for humankind to evolve of its own accord, it would still be in its own state of 6 toes, you understand? Then there has been a realization if we waited for humankind to evolve its own accord, it would still be in its own state of 6 toes, you understand? When there is a group accelerating, the acceleration creates a spin-off. Then that touches others for their acceleration also. Therefore, implemental devices were brought forward, organization for the colony, for the communal development. Also, there were forward offshoots of some who went to what you now identify as China, a great communal country now, and out to other domains more gradually. That was the beginning of what you would term the giants merging with the daughters of men. You understand? Also at that time there were species created from merging together that were brought forth. One civilization connecting genetically with another civilization created a species. That was in the beginning. John, can you say when language began? did they have any language at all before the time of Aksu? Tom, when you ask about language, do you mean verbalizing, writing? John, yes, verbalizing. Tom, do you call grunts and gonks verbalizing? John, I'm talking about language, some kind of grammatical structure. Tom, not totally. John, so the leaders, the giants who came down, added to that and built on the language. Tom, helped the creation of the understanding of the clicks and clacks. You understand? From that evolved development of sound waves, and together with implementation, the development of music. The attempt to imitate the sound of reed plant rubbing together, imitation of wind through trees. John, this is what you once described as tonal language. Tom, that is correct. That is the tonal language of the universe. However, in the dissension, then the bubble came. Everyone was bubbling, like non-humans. That culture moved across planes and pockets, segments of groups, moved forward. It was again necessary for receding. You understand that when there is a separation of people, there is also loss of knowledge. If there is not a group to repeat the knowledge, it is lost. When not utilized, it is not forthcoming in the brain. Therefore, it was necessary for regenetics. Yes. Guess. Was this done with new people who came to planet Earth? Tom, from the same civilizations. Before Abraham, there was one who taught the species said to be from the sea. John, Iones. Tom, yes, except he was not from the sea. John, who was he in terms of the civilizations? Tom, he was from the civilization of Altia. John, I thought so. Just on that point, the leader of Altia was the mythological character Atlas. That is correct. Tom, that is so. John, at one time, I think you said that Atlas and Zeus were one and the same person. Tom, you understand how mythology has confusion? For you see, they say that Zeus made mating with a swan. The swan came from the heavens. Do you understand the complexity? Guest, yes. Tom, primitive man had assumptions. Council has said, I have not answered. That holds up the world was Altia. Yes. John, but I asked if that was the same as Zeus. Tom, humans created that mystical godhead. They gave characters to civilizations to make them gods, when they were not. Zeus with the swan was a ship. When Zeus went into the ship, they called him a god, for it was their mountain. You understand? John, I did not know what you mean by their mountain. Tom, the ship came to their mountain. Guest, Mount Olympus. Tom, the corruption is Zeus. Atlas became Zeus, but Altia was the one. Guest, may I go back to Aksu? Was it a large number of beings who came to Earth who found the Aksu culture, or just a small number? Tom, in the beginning it was a small number, and then there was understood that they were more necessary for seeding. Guest, did it take a long time before the dissension started, and how did it begin? What sort of issues were involved? Tom, they were not connections as they moved into an outlying areas, and confusion reigned, and they became involved in what you would call local developments, and at times merged with the people of those areas. Therefore, there was a loss of memory and reverting back to a more basic state. There it was necessary to re-enhance the genetics. Is that sense? Guest, yes. Did it take a long time between the first arrival and the separation, the dissension? Tom, migration would be a better term. Humankind, and particularly those humankind of genetic exploration, had curiosity, and always there is one that is curious in humankind. Is that not so? So within 1 century, it was moving out, and the necessity of re-enhancing was within 500 of your centuries. We speak not of those who remained. We speak of those who spread around in other places, yes? John, as I understand it, you talked about the hawk being there for about 1,000 years, and the others who followed him for about 4,000 years. Tom, that is correct. Were they not geneticists? They were the people moving outward. John, now Phyllis had a dream the other day, and she felt that she was in Aksu, and she saw a sort of celebration and 3 different groups going in different directions. This dispensing, was it in about 32,000 BC? Tom, yes. John, now, I made an assumption that a cult civilization took responsibility for each of those groups. Is that so? Tom, yes, it is, as you would say, sound. John, well, I imagine this was Ashan, Altia, and Hoover. Is that correct? Tom, that is absolutely correct. John, yes, now I'm trying to determine which ones went in which direction. The ones that went to China, were they of Hoover? Tom, they were of Ashan in combination with Hoover. John, I see. They mixed before they went. Tom, there were those that were mixed and those that were colonized from other planets. In Aksu, there were those that were of pure strain, those who were a mixture of one civilization with people of Earth, and there were those that were mixed strain, mixed again with those of other civilizations. Do you understand this? How may we explain? We will use your solar system as an example. If there was from another planet, we will say how many we explain. Suppose that you had a colonization of, say, from your planet Venus to your planet Earth. Then it was mixed with that of Ashan. That would be one strain. Then it was that if that of Ashan then was mixed with Venus, then mingled with Hoover, that would be of a second strain. Is that not so? John, yes. So they also traveled overland when they split up from Aksu. Is that correct? Tom, yes. John, could we place the 3 occasions of the seedings? As I understand it, the first time was many, many thousands of years ago. The second time was at the time of the Garden of Eden, the time of the Tarim Basin, and then the third time was at the time of Abraham. Is that correct? Tom, that is correct. John, yes, so the first seeding came with the arrival of the hawk. Tom, that is also correct. The second one arrived after a millennium. John, 1,000 years after the hawk. Tom, approximately. John, okay. Now, in relation to that, the groups of beings who were in the Tarim Basin, were they purely evolved, or had they mixed with some other seedings that had also taken place? Tom, that is correct. They were of Hoover. John, they were purely of the Hoovid, so they hadn't normatically met with any of the other groups that were also seeded, as I understand it. Tom, that is correct. John, and Altia was one of the other civilizations that had seeded. Is that correct? Tom, that is correct. John, you once mentioned the small people, and I never understood what that meant. Was that referring to the people who were seeded by Hoover? Were they smaller? Tom, we speak that humankind, when they landed, were smaller. Those who came were giants, compared to those that existed on planet Earth. Andrew, going back to those early periods of mingling and hybridization, we understand from our science on Earth that a major phase of the Ice Age ended around the time of the original landing of 32,400 years. What can you tell us about that? Was it actually ending, or was it still in existence? Tom, it was already over. Andrew, was Aksu at that time a fertile green area, not desert? Tom, it had not become sprung, but it was warming. Andrew, the area was still cold, relatively. Tom, that is truth. It was not lush, but brown and reeds. John, I'd like to ask about what we know as the Adam and Eve story. We discussed that, and it came to the consensus that the first space being called the Hawk came to prepare, then another came with a mandate, not to engage in physical intercourse with the females here until the time was right. The temptation then came. Is this correct? Tom, the first being came to give knowledge to the natives that existed upon earth, about plants and animals. Then the second space being came, and he had great sadness, for he saw the mating of the natives and the animals of the planet. His sadness was not for the mating, but for the not having a companion to communicate with. So then was what was given to him to communicate with. At that time it was asked that he not become involved in the ways of the planet Earth, for at that level to which he was involved, it would have been disastrous for him to become involved in physical mating without adapting, without his body adjusting to a new equilibrium. So he was asked to refrain from this, to adapt him to pressurize within his body, and for him to understand the function that would come within his body, and also as an example to those that existed, so that mating would be utilized only for the highest purpose. Then the one that fell came upon him and his woman companion, and placed him within him a sense of the true knowledge, which gave him the desire to be equal to God. The tragedy of this is that he came from the Creator and forgot this. So there was no need to attempt to be equal to God, but while on earth he found the need for this. John, I would just like to understand about the one that fell in this context. Tom, it was the archangel of whom you know. We wish not to use the name. In your Adam and Eve story, he was the serpent. You see, it was never meant to be of two sides. It was all meant to be in equality. John, do you mean the male and female, or negative and positive? Tom, negative and positive. Irene, when Adam and Eve chose not to understand the definition of obedience, which was part of the dialogue in paradise between you and them, and when they saw the truth of what obedience meant and turned away from the responsibility of that, then humankind was set forth on a path where we had to define good and evil for ourselves in the context of bondage? Tom, that is correct. Irene, and the time before the fall is where the purity lies within humanity. It is on that purity that the transformation of the modern world will take place? Tom, that is correct. This modern world is the result of that contamination, and therefore transformation would be the result of non-contamination. Irene, yes, that's why reality is changing in our modern times, and the process now is in the piercing of that veil, because all reality does it continue to mirror where we were since the fall? Because all reality does it. I read this again. Irene, yes, and that's why reality is changing in our modern times, and the process now is the piercing of that veil, because all reality does is continue to mirror where we were since the fall. Tom, that is correct. It is the illusion that you humans are equal or superior to the Creator and creation, and the reality you take to be real is illusion. Irene, so what is necessary now in the establishing of a philosophical construct of Eden, so that everything else will have its proper order? Tom, so it becomes a water full of purity. Irene, well, that's great. Israel, let's go do it. Tom, it is now in motion, but there are also those who will seek to disturb this. Know who you are, trust yourself, trust us, and know it will be done, and continuously view your motives in order to keep yourself in alignment with your highest purpose. And that is what is necessary upon planet Earth. For you know of the contamination on planet Earth, and the way that people made them attempt to misconstrue this forwardness and dawning of paradise. Irene, are you willing to say anything about the identity of Eve, or her symbolic identity? Tom, we will not at this point. As you know, Eve became identified with the notion of original sin, and Eve, the feminine, was buried, and the male aspect continued and consumed Earth, because it was out of balance in the female. The male aspect felt that the female had brought disaster upon the Earth, when in truth the male never accepted responsibility for his own choosing. Now it is time for that responsibility to be taken. In those times, Adam and Eve had complete harmony and balance with nature. They had understanding of the rights of nature and of each issue within nature, and their communication with not only animals and flora, but also with rocks, soil, water and wind, and the moon and the sun and all. In the present day, the time of the female, the essence of Eve is coming to the fore, and what must be done is the complete merging of male and female, not for the male to attempt to bind the female, and not for the female to attempt to suppress the male, but to work in complete joy, in harmony and in unity, as two pillars that are holding up the world, separate but together. Yes? Steve. Considering the question of balance of the positive and negative in Earth history, has there been ever a time when an excess of the positive has been the problem? Tom. Yes, I should relate to you the time. There was such a state of positivity when all the birds sang and all the animals loved and all the flowers bloomed, and that was during the period of Adam and Eve, the period of Aksu. That was the time of paradise, but also a time when the nature of the positive was out of balance. It was our era. Steve. So there had been an introduction of the negative in order to promote further evolution. Tom. In a form of speaking, yes, we had not anticipated the result of desire. When humanity had no challenge for growth, then they can dissipate energy. Steve. How did the mythology of paradise and the Garden of Eden arise? Tom. Earth is the most beautiful of all that exists in the universe. It has variety that no other planet has. It has a varied climate that no other planet has. In truth, if the souls on Earth were of the highest evolution, it would be considered a paradise. This planet Earth may be a paradise when the density is removed. But when we say that, we speak of a paradise of creativity, a paradise that brings knowledge, a paradise that brings joy and love, a paradise in which humans may heal themselves or may experience, if they wish so, pain. But it is not a paradise where all challenge will be removed, all growth will be removed, all pain will be removed. It will be a paradise that humans can create through their own evolution, their own understanding of their correctness and connection with the universe, and their accepting of responsibility for themselves, for their fellows, for planet Earth. All will be brought into perfection. All will be brought into perfection. It is Friday evening, and it is the 24th of July, 2020. I'm wishing everybody a wonderful weekend, and I shall read more. Good night.